those. I certainly enjoy reading them. I pass them on to staff as well as letting the board know, and we like getting those. It's certainly a nice way of getting some feedback on what we're doing out in the community. So certainly, if I'll open it up if council have any questions or comments at this point in time.
Thank you so much, Chief, and thank you for the brevity. It is a long report. I have read it and take advantage of it. So Councillor Allen's going to start us off with a question or comment.
Yes, I just have a few, Chief. Thank you for your leadership and your ongoing support for our community. All of the programs that your report outlines are things that are keeping our community safe and happy. I was really impressed with the additional mental health nurse and staff, because I know in my experience at any rate, loneliness and those kinds of mental health issues, that makes it very hard, and it sometimes changes their personality so much. I also commend you on continuing to have the program, the community service officer. I think our town is very blessed to have Aaron. I know I sit with him in the Municipal Drug Strategy Committee, and the work that he's been doing to help that, well, it's just noteworthy. And so thank you very much for all that you're doing to keep us safe.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. That it is the expansion or the addition with our mobile crisis unit has proven itself very well in the community. It is nice to have those skilled individuals with our officers responding to calls in real time. I think it's been a real benefit to the community, and it certainly alleviates time being spent in bringing people to hospitals, and certainly especially in the during the pandemic, and it allows them to get some assistance and referrals much quicker. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mayor Panko, and then Councillor Alford will follow that.
Yeah, I think in many ways, Councillor Allen's question regarding the mobile crisis team and your answer, Chief, were largely my questions. And the only missing piece there, I guess, is a decision made years earlier to invest in the Health IM system. And so I just wonder if you're able to comment on how our officers, the frontline officers, are maybe better equipped to deal with mental health crisis now that they have the support of the crisis team, as well as the Health IM system that was implemented, I think, probably 3 years ago.
Yes, the Health IM system, and that's our computer system that helps when we attend some of these calls, and it provides a mental health screening tool, which it's fairly easy to use for the officers, and it just provides some of the language that's needed sometimes when we do have, and so it helps assess whether a person what level of crisis they're in. And certainly with the mobile crisis workers, the big thing has been it's really an on-the-job training. Having these nurses and counselors working right out of our offices is great. It provides real training to the officers every call they go to. They provide some insight and some assistance for the next call.
Thank you.
Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's good to see you again, Mark, and I'm always grateful for all the officers that work with you, civilians as well. I am a supporter of our police services, but there's a couple of things that I and more not for council's information, but more some things in the community that there may be some misconceptions about. But first, I want to say, last year I asked you what the impact of the legalization of cannabis had been on our crime statistics, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what the pandemic has meant in terms of our crime stats.
Well, it's thank you, Councillor Alford. I mean, sometimes the statistics, there are some areas that maybe go up as people are maybe stuck at home a little more. Although there's some areas that maybe don't go up as high, some of you not seeing maybe as many break and enters just because people are home more. So some simple things like that, or things like traffic accidents. Again, not as much traffic, so maybe our traffic accidents are down a little bit from the previous year. Our mental health calls for service are up. They're up, partially because we've expanded the unit and provide more service. But also certainly the pandemic has played a large role in people being at home or people not being able to go to work and some of those things. So it's some areas and some of the statistics go up a little bit and some go down. But I am happy to say that there hasn't been any huge spikes that would cause us great concern. I think we've got a great community with a lot of community partners and agencies and outlets for people to be able to access.
Just another, again, to clear up any misconceptions, it's not necessarily understood what the relationship between council and police services is, and what oversight or control that council might have over any operational things that have to do. Can you just encapsulate, and again, not for councils, they're aware, but for people who are watching, what the relationship is between council and our police services?
Well, obviously, and I report to the Police Services Board, and the reason that has been, and that's part of the provincial act, is sort of to keep, I guess, public safety so that it doesn't become a political decision, if you will. So there's that bit of a buffer, and having a police service board with council representation allows certainly for input and a role to play by council in budgeting and overseeing the management of the police service. But operationally, under the act, it falls under the chief of police to deal with day-to-day operations, and largely because of the experience and knowledge from that position generally, that sort of I guess, if you will, daddy knows best, and that's so to some extent we just I answer to the board, and certainly and the board governs policy and direction of goals and objectives for the service, and I provide advice and counsel to the board, and then the board then answers to council.
Thank you, Mark. And again, I'm pleased to see, and please pass along our continued appreciation to our police services, all of them.
Thank you very much. I will.
I'm not seeing any other hands. So again, thank you very much, Chief, and please extend our best wishes to your entire civilian and uniformed force, and we wish you all a safe year going forward.
Thank you very much, and I wish the same to everyone.
Thank you. Okay, we have a recommended motion that the minutes of March 8th, 2021 and March 22nd committee of the whole meetings be received and filed. Can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Allen, second by Councillor Alford. Any questions or changes to those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. CEO Morris, I understand we have a number of directors and staff reports tonight, and I'll ask you to determine who is in your queue and invite them to start us off.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to start by acknowledging an oversight. I missed acknowledging Chief Cheeseborough when I introduced staff. He was here. I didn't see his name at the time, but he's with us, and it's only fitting that he start off the director's reports this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report tonight is covering our Municipal Emergency Control Group meeting that we held last week. And certainly after today's announcement, there's been some significant changes as a result of our meeting last week. I won't go over the stats with the exception to say that Ontario has jumped from last Thursday to today by 20,000 confirmed cases. But the key for our area, Lanark, Leeds, Grenville, we reported last Thursday that we had 77 active cases. As of today, we're up to 118. We've had one additional death. We have 3 active in ventilation. Last Thursday, there was 2. And our active cases in hospital from last week to today went from 7 to 11. The health unit reports numerous workplace outbreaks, which they're continuing to monitor. The health unit is seeing variants of concern in eastern parts of this region. Last week, the province of Ontario had announced through the Premier's office that we were back into a full state of emergency for a 4-week period. Again, last Thursday, schools will remain open locally at this time. They were closed in the hotspots, but as of today's announcement, we know that that's changed. Big box stores are now only permitted to sell essential or food items, which is going to assist the smaller retail shops. Shopping malls are permitted to be open for pickup and by appointment only. Some smaller retails must do the curbside pickup or delivery. The province also announced last week that there will be no evictions during this 4-week period. Dog grooming can continue. Vaccines now available for 60 plus through participating pharmacies and now has been moved to 55 plus. Local vaccine clinics will continue operating as usual. Access to vaccines for essential municipal staff was discussed with Dr. Stewart. We were hoping to get an answer where we could include our wastewater and water staff along with our police dispatchers for essential workers. That decision has yet to be made. The municipal impact from the announcements last week, the before and after school operations will continue. Director Manhire will discuss that in his update. Building inspections and fire inspections, we will continue to do them, provided that there's full PPE being worn, not only by the people conducting the inspections, but the people that are on site. This will include eye protection. We will stress and request that the property be vacant before we go over. We have experienced going to a site for an inspection where there wasn't a single person on that construction site that was wearing protective clothing. I've instructed certainly my staff and advised Director Costello for the building staff, should you show up to something like that and they're not in protective clothing or wearing it and they don't have the safety signs posted, then you're not to go in and do the inspection. It can be rescheduled when they meet the provincial and municipal guidelines. Dog parks, playgrounds, tennis courts are allowed to remain open with social distancing and signage required. Single play for tennis or pickleball is permitted. No team sports can occur. Some non-essential projects will be put on hold until the stay-at-home order is lifted. And 40% of Ontario population is expected to be vaccinated within the next 4 weeks. Today's announcement has certainly given us a greater percentage within the next 4 weeks they're hoping to have vaccinated. The health unit will continue to visit the large box stores this week to ensure that the non-essential areas are blocked off. We've gone over our personal protective equipment and we're continuing to acquire protective equipment as obviously there's been a greater need for it. If the gatherings are permitted, public health guidelines must be followed. And the last couple things, the Ministry of Labor, through the Minister of Labor, had indicated that 18 inspectors had been deployed through Lanark, Leeds, Grenville, through the Smith Falls and Perth area to do spot checks to ensure that the legislation is being followed. Police will be still out in force along with bylaw. They still will be conducting educational information sessions with people before any enforcement tools are put in place. And the last thing is, at this point in time, not only is the province and the county reinforcing the need for people to keep that 6 feet apart, continue to wear the face mask, continue to sanitize your hands. that's going to be critical. And certainly with the March break / April break now in force, it's even more important now. Toronto announced today that they're expecting that their case counts could go as high as 3,000 a day. So in order for us to stay where we are and try to keep the numbers down, we have to be vigilant. And certainly through the mayor and through the CAO at our control group, we've been able to stress that, but it's even more critical now that we continue to continue stressing all the precautionary measures. That is my update for tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Questions or comments? None. Yeah, we're all absorbing this. It does change regularly. I congratulate the emergency team for their work on keeping us all safe, and the good people of Smith Falls for following to the best of their abilities all of the various rules, and I hope everybody gets vaccinated soon. So thank you very much, Chief Cheeseborough.
Thank you.
CEO Morris, who's next?
Yes, so our second verbal report of 4 is from Director Manhire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a few things to update. And as the chief indicated, childcare, the preschool will be open and will continue to be open during the school shutdown. The before and after care will not be operating at this point. The province has indicated that they are looking to provide school-age childcare for people that are essential workers or frontline workers. So we will be reaching out to the county and the province to see if that's a service that we will continue to provide. And as council knows, we provided that service right from April of last year. And so I will check with staff around capacity and the county and province around need. Staff are also preparing outdoor spaces for people's use. Now that we are in lockdown and the weather is getting better, we're having people going out and using our parks and our outdoor amenities. We want to make sure that that's being done safely. So staff are preparing those sites, and we'll be doing that over the next week or two. So we just encourage people to follow the guidelines as indicated, and the signage will be there to let people know what the protocols are. And lastly, there's people will notice the installation at the dog parks. We are preparing and pouring concrete pads for the shelter and benches that are going into that area. So they're also going to be working on the drainage for the entry for the park, because that's been a bit of a challenge in years past. So there will be some work down there. We have reached out to the supplier for porta potties, and we will be placing those in the parks as well as soon as they can be made available. The concern is that they want them to be deployed with no chance of freezing at night. So that's what we're waiting for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I see Councillor McGuire has a question or comment.
Thanks, Director Manhire. I'm wondering if are we able to reassign the staff for the before and after school program, or are they off right now?
Mr. Chair, it's a good question. Right now, they're in place. We do have a couple of staff that were still off from earlier, and that will be part of the factoring in terms of whether we can actually provide essential care workers care through this time. So at this point, we have not laid anybody off, and we don't anticipate having to do that.
So the people that are off are how do you define that? They're
off on voluntary leave.
Okay, so
there's
there's
people
no
who have chosen not to come back.
Okay. Thanks. The second question is with the geese in the park. How's that going, and what are we doing to keep them on their way?
It is an ongoing battle. We will be bringing the swans back in. The challenge with the swans right now, and as council knows, the swans are there not only for their own beauty, but also because they tend to be a bit territorial and encourage the geese to move on. Right now, we can't introduce them because the water levels are low enough that they can get into the lower reach basin. and we would prefer to keep them in the upper reach basin. So as soon as Parks Canada raises their water level, we'll be able to do that. Parks Canada has indicated that they are going to raise the water level earlier than normal because they want to do some work on a couple of the locks. So as soon as that happens, we will be introducing them. We are also working with the Rideau Roundtable, and part of their planting strategy is around not only shoreline stabilization, but also discouraging ground nesting from geese. So that's part of our overall strategy. The more use we get down at the parks as well, the better, because it does create traffic, and geese are looking for a nice quiet area to raise their young. So if as people get out, it will discourage that.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Manhire. CEO Morris, who's next?
Next up, we have Director Dunlop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 4 updates for the committee tonight. The first one I wanted to start with is the Ontario Commuter Cycling Grant. As the committee is aware, we've had some challenges safeguarding that $25,000 grant that was originally earmarked for the waterfront trail. We've had a lot of discussions with the Ministry of Transportation staff, and it looks like we may have a fit with the active transportation plan for 2021. We're hoping to get confirmation on that very soon, but you can expect a report coming forward in a very near one of the next cycles, should I say, to probably have that change implemented and safeguard that grant. Second update this evening, we are doing some tree clearing. I did want to bring it to the attention of council. We've been working with VIA and Rail Term on some tree clearing that has to be done along the perimeter of the railway besides Sussex Street. That clearing is going right now in terms of a necessity for rail safety. So you should notice some removals this week, and it'll be wrapping up probably by Friday. Third update, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we had a grant application in with them last summer. As you will recall, it was under their municipal asset management program. We sought out funding for a road and sidewalk assessment program that had a value of approximately $33,000. We heard some promising news that we will have a response on that very shortly. If we do receive that funding, it would put us at about $27,000. So we're hoping to have something before council on that very soon. Last update for this evening is Connecting Links Intake 6. Of course, on Friday, the town received notice from the Minister of Transportation, Carolyn Mulrooney, that the town was successful in its grant application for Beckwith Street Phase 2. That, of course, is the 2021-2022 Connecting Links program. Very pleased to report that we received just over 1.8 million towards the construction of the key elements in Beckwith Street Phase 2 that would include storm sewers, the roadway curbs, accessibility upgrades, and the traffic signals at Elmsley Street. So some great news to share on that. We expect to get the contribution agreement from the ministry very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dunlop. Questions or comments? You cycled through that fairly quickly, Director Dunlop, and I appreciate that. If I've read the AMO report today, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, I think that second round that Minister Mulrooney was talking about only went to 14 communities, that second enhanced funding to, so I know there was earlier announcements, but it looks like this additional funding, if I've read it properly, only 14 communities benefited. So we're very fortunate and certainly thank the provincial government for that investment in our community. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Director Dunlop.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris.
So I have one item this evening to share. So committee members will recall that this council and the previous one have been advocating for changes at the policy level with respect to the cemetery care and maintenance funds. They're very limited in their application. So we've done a number of advocacy efforts with various provincial ministers, and they listened to what we said. They formed a working group, and we were part of that municipal working group. There were also private cemetery operators on the group. So we met twice, once in December of 2019, and then again last September. So we provided, myself and our several municipal colleagues provided our advice on, and what we were advocating for is more autonomy, basically, on how we use the funds, provided it's done in a way that meets, you know, accounting standards. So they heard us out, and then just last week they announced changes to the regulation within the Act. So there are a series of changes. The two that are of import to us is the ability for non-commercial cemetery operators, so we would be in that category, to access the capital portion of the account or the reserve to expand the capacity of the cemetery. So you may recall previously, or at least the case right now, is you can only use the capital to purchase land to expand the cemetery. It was very much focused on burials. We're delighted to say they heard what we said, and they've, as of January 1st of next year, we will be able to use the capital portion of the reserve for other expansion efforts. That would include, at least our interpretation is that would include purchasing a columbarium, for instance. The last time we purchased a columbarium, we had to dip into tax-supported reserves to pay for it, even though we had a large reserve of cemetery funds. So that's a very, very positive change. The other one is they've increased the contributions to the reserve. So they have various structures. So a typical burial, previously we had to set aside $250 or 40% of the price into the reserve. They've increased those numbers. Not necessarily a good thing for municipalities. It's particularly important for private cemetery operators to have money set aside. But for us, we have a healthy reserve, but it means we're going to have to, starting next January, put more aside for each burial or niche that we sell in a columbarium. So overall, I would say it's not groundbreaking, if I can use that term, but it is a step in the right direction in terms of some of the things that we've been asking for from the ministry. So it's good news, but I think our advocacy efforts should continue, but it's a very, very strong start.
Thank you, CEO Morris. Comments or questions? Councillor Alfred.
Yeah, I appreciate the work you've done on this, Malcolm, because you're right. We did take one step forward. I know when this first came up for me, one of the things that I wanted to, and I don't know if this is still on the list of advocacy efforts, is is there an ability to borrow from that reserve for other things? And again, only borrow because we do have to take care of all the foreverness that goes with a cemetery. But one of the things I had thought of, because at the time we had talked, we had $500,000 in a reserve and just keep putting more and more and more in it. But would there be the ability for us to borrow from ourselves?
Yeah, through the chair, the answer would be no. They did not change that. The only borrowing we can do is from the reserve, again, for cemetery expansion capital items. And I would note we have to pay it back to the reserve. So again, I think it's a solid first step.
Yeah, thank you.
And seeing no other questions or comments, I thank you, CEO Morris, for that update. And no other directors' reports. So we'll move to item number 6, correspondence items. And we received a letter from Mr. Bob Peltzer, who's the director of the Ottawa Valley Cycling and Active Transportation Alliance, who sent council a suggestion on how Smith Falls could improve our role as a link between a number of trails cutting through the Eastern Ontario. It's a very positive letter with helpful suggestions. Would it be of interest to council, if we bring it forward at a future COW for a discussion? Now, Councilor McGuire, you got your hand up there quickly. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I know we've got another report coming from the cycle strategy later in the spring. So maybe if we incorporated it into that. And I just wanted to note, I had a great call with the director, Bob, and when he was coming through last summer, Beckwith Street was ripped up, and so he kind of bypassed stuff of that. But it seems like they're really interested in having that come through the main drag. So hopefully we could get those two things working together and have it at a future COW.
Yes, I see a lot of nodding heads. Of interest today, the Lanark County Warden was on the radio talking about the wonderful trails in Lanark County. And they've been partly due to COVID, but the usage among trails is skyrocketing and the cycling is skyrocketing. So I would agree, and over to staff to include that letter in a future COW related to a cycling agenda item, which Councillor McGuire referred to. Is that enough direction? CO Morris?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's good. I would just comment that this suggestion somewhat triangulates the work we're doing both on the active transportation front as well as the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So we're going to see those coalesce and come together, and this will be a great topic for discussion when we bring to start the Parks and Recreation Plan forward. So it's a great suggestion, and much more to come on that.
In the meantime, could we respond to Mr. Peltzer and thank him for the letter and let him know that it is our intention to bring it forward in such a way?
We will.
Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls under the Municipal Act amend and move into a closed meeting session to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals related to committee appointees. Councillor Brennan has moved that. Councillor McGuire has seconded. All in favor. So it's carried. We're going to go in camera to the public. We won't be long. Please bear with us, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back, everyone. We've come out of our in-camera session, and I thank you for your patience. The Rise and Report is with the agreement from my colleagues, we're going to add an item to priority issues 8.8 to our agenda tonight. It's the Racism and Discrimination Task Force membership, and we'll be talking about that towards the end of this meeting. Thank you. So moving on to priority issues, we have 8.1, the Visitor Services Award, and I think Ms. Miller is going to bring that in light for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this spring we sought proposals for visitor services based out of the building at Victoria Park, and we wanted to ensure that visitor services were still provided to our guests arriving to Smiths Falls by boat. So getting boaters to dock their boat and enjoy all that Smiths Falls has to offer is a key part of our tourism strategy. So we asked for the following services in our proposal request: tourism services promoting town assets, including museums, organized tours and walking trails, promotion of Smiths Falls businesses, services, events, and activities, and boating services, including pump outs and mooring. The goal, of course, was to ensure that every guest to Smiths Falls has an outstanding experience and feels the welcoming nature of our small town. So 7 organizations requested a copy of the RFP package, and 2 submitted proposals by the deadline of March 19th. The scoring was laid out to allow proponents the opportunity to propose the most effective ways to approach this work. As you can see in your report, the Smiths Falls Chamber of Commerce received the highest score, with their proposal highlighting their years of experience in providing boating services, but also several new initiatives that may include bike rentals, specialty markets, entertainment, souvenirs and beach toys, and refreshments. And the key was they spoke of partnering with their membership to ensure that Smiths Falls can benefit from the boat traffic coming through the canal. So it's therefore staff's recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls award RFP 21-ED-02 to the Smiths Falls and District Chamber of Commerce to provide visitor services at Victoria Park for the 2021 season.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Councillor Dwyer is the first off tonight.
Thank you, and I'll apologize right now if you've got a little bit of background noise. I think this is fantastic. I think it's great to see that the chamber is still interested in running this facility and will continue on, despite the fact that the campground's not there. I love the idea that the service could include bike rentals and markets and music and more entertainment. I assume that those were not structured in as requirements of the RFP. Is there anything we can do to try and ensure that those things do end up happening?
Yes, please.
Through the chair, we have had a conversation with the chamber once this was posted to council's agenda, and spoke about some of the potential businesses that might enjoy partnering with them on this endeavor. And it is my understanding they are going to start those conversations right away.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, obviously going to support this. The chamber is very creative, as we all know, and I think that they'll make absolutely the most of what's available to them down there. So I support it.
Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Everybody's giving a thumbs up, and of course, Ms. Miller, you referred to it as boating tourism, but that's a very busy road, and to see the tourism information sign, I know that there'll be traffic pulling in to say, can you tell me where the town hall is, or beautiful town hall, or something like that. So it'll be open to any tourists, not just the boaters.
That's right. Thank you.
So that will be coming forward in the very near future for a final approval at a council meeting. And it looks like we've got a consensus on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 8.2, Daniel Street Road closure with Director Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report before you this evening is to formally get council's direction on serving public a notice to the public on the closure of Daniel Street. As previously presented to council on March 15th, there was a presentation where the delegate showed you pictures or concept of the town square, which included the closure of Daniel Street to accommodate this request. There is a public process to undertake, and this report does outline that. There'd be notices served to the public, as well as any comments received in writing would be received by the clerk's office. On May 3rd, council could take any of those comments or hear any people who wanted to vet any comments publicly at that meeting. And then council can make their decision on the future of the road closure of Street. So at this point, looking for council's direction to formally give staff direction to post the notice of your intent to close a portion of Daniel Street.
Thank you, Director Costello. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Just to confirm, the services that are underneath Daniel Street, my understanding there is some, but they won't be consequential if we close it.
Correct. So there is no public utility underneath Daniel Street. We have confirmed that. There is a communications conduit that won't be affected. And as well, there is a water main that will be abandoned as part of Beckwith Street Phase 2, Councillor Brennan.
Okay, thank you.
I'm seeing a lot of fun. Oh, Mayor Panko, did you want to jump in on that? Or just?
Yeah,
please.
No, I support the recommendation. I'm anxious to move ahead with this, and I think as much as it sometimes is a convenient turn for us, a short freeway use to avoid some traffic, in the end, I think it's going to help us create some better public space for the betterment of the community.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nodding, so we're all in favor of this. I would note that this may be the first time in Smith Falls history that council has approved removing pavement from a street. We spend a lot of time and energy paving our roads, and so to actually de-pave something is a really wonderful step. Obviously, not every street should be de-paved, but this one is ideal for more green space. So I'm thrilled about this, and we look forward to you kicking off that process, Director Costello.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're moving on to 8.3, Chamber of Commerce Council representation. I think Councillor Brennan perhaps wanted to maybe start us off on this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I'll speak to that, Mr. Chair. I've been on the chamber probably 10 years now, and I've always had a partner from council, and Councillor Alford was my partner before. We worked out pretty good. And so now that I'm alone again, I think it's helpful to have two of us there. I'll just tell you that they meet monthly. The meetings are not long, and they're in the morning, 7:30 in the morning on Wednesdays. I think it's the second week of every month. So it would be good backup, and it would be good. We give a report about what's happening at council, and then we take the information that they give us and report back to you people. And if someone can't go, then the other one can be there. If both are there, it's even better, because sometimes we miss some information. So I'm just putting that out there for my colleagues. If anyone wants to join me, they would be most welcome by me, and I'm sure the chamber as well.
Thank you.
Volunteers, please.
Any other comments or volunteers, or Councillor Dwyer?
I acknowledge that I don't sit on a ton of committees on behalf of council, and chamber, if it meets at 7:30 in the morning, that is something I could likely attend, particularly given COVID and electronic meeting formats. So if no one else has an interest in it, then I'd be happy to put my hat forward.
Okay. Deputy Clerk Bennett, is there, what process do we need to go through? I'm assuming it's some sort of a motion to approve that.
Yes, so depending on the outcome of the discussion, the action item would be that a resolution would come forward to the next meeting of council to appoint the second member to the Chamber of Commerce Board.
Okay, Councillor Alford, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just for a second, and I'm glad if Nikki is going to be able to attend that. I would suggest to council, though, that we have perhaps we should think about a change of the terms of reference for that, because a real you're alone, DBA I'm alone, CIP you're alone, CDC you're alone. It is one of the more the chamber is one of the ones with less maybe of a workload than some of the other committees. Certainly the monthly meetings are one thing. If the representative choose to engage, as I did, it can be quite a bit more work in their events and their activities in both attending and helping with them. So I would suggest, not that I have any objection to Councillor Dwyer going on, I suggest that council could think about just having one rep on it, because there are more committees coming up all the time, and tonight we're going to get another one over the racism and discrimination. And so I just to make most effective use of our manpower, the 7 of us attending so many things. But I'm fine with but I think this is something the council should perhaps consider.
Thank you, Councillor Alford. I take your point. I suppose the memberships were established years ago, a lot of these things, and we've done it that way because we've always done it that way. So perhaps there's a process that we could look at prior to the next council, where we would look at all the appointments and just say, we got the right number of people. Do we really need to be on that one? Is it too many? Is that not enough? Perhaps that's something we can do in the next year. CEO Morris, I'm looking to you. Is it it won't be under the procedural bylaw, which we're expecting to get, but it may be.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe it's within the procedural bylaw.
No.
So yeah, that's something that council can decide on at any point. The timing you've suggested is probably the best timing to look forward at the next term of council. So we can flag that item and bring it forward in advance of the next election to review all of the committees and the appointments to those committees.
Would my colleagues be okay with that, including the chamber, not just singling the chamber out? And it looks like there was a lot of thumbs up for Councillor Dwyer's stepping forward, and we appreciate that. And Councillor Brennan for raising this. So it looks like we've got agreement and a path forward. Thank you. Now we're moving right along here to the 8.4. Ms. Gozil is going to talk about the federal gas tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On March 25th, the federal government announced that they would be increasing the federal gas tax, and they have now renamed it Canada Community Building Fund by 2.2 million in 2021, which is almost double the allocation. Based on this announcement, the town of Smiths Falls will be receiving approximately 536,000 in top-up funding, along with our 2021 allocation, which is about 557,000. So our total will be about 1.1 million. Within my report, staff had provided some potential projects for council's direction. And at that time, our staff's recommendation was to reduce the budgeted long-term debt in 2021, which was earmarked for Lombard and Abbott and Cornelia. Now, with that, there would be cost savings of the repayments in 2022 of about 40,000. So that was the rationale for that, and to accelerate our meter replacement program. Since then, as Director Dunlop reported, we have been successful with our application for connecting link funding for phase 2. So the majority of this commits to a 2022 construction, but there is a potential to advance some of the underground in the fall of 2021. So these expenditures would be considered eligible components under this federal gas tax funding. Just to note, none of those costs were in the 2021 approved capital budget. So without this top up, they would have to come from the applicable capital reserves. So with that, I will field any questions or.
Okay, why don't we start off with Mayor Panko tonight?
Yeah, thank you, Janet. Obviously, welcome news on Friday. And when I read the report over the weekend, I thought the Beckwith Street Phase 2 would be a natural fit for this funding. And as much as it may be late this year, early next year before that is going, hopefully later this year, it fits within the time frame suitable for this. So I support the sort of the modified recommendation and utilize this for Beckwith Street Phase 2.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Alford.
Well, I have a bit of a different spin on it. No, it's all good news. And thank you, Janet, for adding that to the list of options. I wonder whether we want, for one thing, we're never going to borrow less expensively than what we are currently doing. And so I am not adverse to perhaps giving some consideration to instead of not financing part of Beckwith or Lombard Abbott or Cornelia Street, that council may want to consider doing something that's a little more, taking some of that money and diverting it to something that is more visible and more of use to some of our residents. We have parks and we have paths, and we're talking a lot about that. And this may be an opportunity. The analogy I use is if you put a new furnace in, nobody knows, nobody sees it, and nobody appreciates it, which is a lot of what is going on with Beckwith Street. But if we were able to take some of that and do something more with our parks and our paths to connect them and beautify them and enhance them, I'm not saying take the whole 500, I'm saying take a chunk of it and think about doing something that our citizens could enjoy and in a fairly short order. So I offer that as a suggestion as well, that one of the options was that council could come up with an option of their own. And I'm wondering whether we shouldn't maybe take this opportunity to do something that's a little more physical, a little more visual, a little more attractive to a lot of our residents, particularly given our current situation and how the pressure on both our parks and our paths. So I throw that out there to my colleagues.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Well, while you're pondering that, I'll jump in with my thoughts then. This is wonderful news. And there is a heavy emphasis on roads and transportation, which is part of it, but there was a big cultural piece as part of the funding as well. And the other thought I have is there's some way we can enhance the library's development with any of this. That's been on our list. It's been moved forward and kicked down the road. Is there an opportunity to use some of it towards that as well? And it also notes that this money can be accumulated and saved. We don't have to spend it all right now. Is there any money in that particular account at this point is it down to zero and we're starting again? Director, Ms. Cozio?
No, for the most part, it was allocated in the 2021. There's minimal in there. I can't remember the exact amount, but there is minimal. Just a couple of things, if I could, on Councillor Alford's comments. Our long-term debt, when we take the financing, it's not until the end of the year or the project's completion. So right now the interest rates are low, but there is definitely, it's trending, it's volatile right now. And I think when the pandemic hopefully comes to an end in the fall, that we may see those going up. So at the time we obtain this funding, that's just something to consider. And the other thing is on the phase 2 of Beckwith, the application did indicate that we forecasted some costs in 2021 that we had not budgeted for. So those was 458,000. So it will have to come out of reserves otherwise.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, it's anytime you get money like this, it falls from the sky, and I think that I agree with the mayor. The best use of this money is for something that we've got on the books, and I totally agree that parks need attention, and I believe we've got money in the budget right now to do some things, but this is the most immediate thing, and I think that it's best applied to this massive project that we have going.
So at least, Councillor Alford?
And either Treasurer Koziola or CEO, do we have to make a decision tonight, or can we give this some thought?
If I could, through the chair, originally I had reached out to AMO and they had asked, the deadline was April 15th. I have since reached out when we received this news and knew there may be some discussion on potentially other projects, and there is some leniency to that. But I think it would be in short order that they would be anticipating we would do that. Just another thing I wanted to make a point is our current agreement for the federal gas tax, any of the projects that you look at have to be on our asset management plan. So you can't pick a project that, that is not already denoted as a priority. So just something to consider as well.
Okay. I don't see a lot of people jumping to alternative funding other than what has been recommended in the report. So I'm taking that as a general consensus that we want to accept Ms. Koziel's report and the recommendation from staff. And unless I hear a strong objection to that, that will be the, yes, Director, Ms. Koziel, please.
Well, as I had indicated, my original report before we had this announcement was to reduce the long-term borrowing, but now we are proposing to use the top up for phase 2 of Beckwith.
In your verbal report, yes.
That's correct.
And does everybody understand that? And that's we're in support of? Okay. You have your direction then.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will come back to the library at another time. So we're moving on. Please don't go anywhere, Janet. The 2021 tax rates report.
So this report I'm bringing forward to obtain council's approval to establish the 2021 tax rate. A bylaw is required each year following budget approval in order to levy the taxes. Final taxes owing shall be calculated as the difference between the total amount levied and any interim payments paid to date. The interim taxes were based on 50% of last year's taxes. The final tax bills will be prepared and mailed out approximately the first week of June. The final levy shall be due and payable in 2 installments, June 30th and August 30th. On February 1st, council approved the municipal 2021 levy requirement in the amount of $14,823,663, and inclusive of a tax rate increase of 1.1. At that time, council was advised that the impact to the average residential tax bill was estimated to be about $34 a year. It is important to note that due to the pandemic, the province postponed the planned provincial tax assessment for the next 4-year cycle. This meant that the property assessments for the 2021 taxation year were based on the same values that were in the 2020 taxation. So with that, I will pause and answer any questions you may have.
Questions, comments, Councillor Alford?
Just a comment, and again, it's a good news story right now in that the values assessed are going to stay at 2016, but it doesn't bode well for whenever they get around to doing it, in light of the fact that we also have a plan of what our tax rates should be in the future. If that is coupled with a horrendous increase by impact, that year will be a bad news story.
Please, Janet.
So just to follow up, it was within my report, but I didn't make a verbal note to that, is that we have been notified of late that the 2022 will be frozen as well. They'll start discussions at the end of this year to see how they're going to move forward with that, but we'll be in the same position for next year's budget.
Yeah. A future council is going to have to deal with that.
Any other comments or questions? I'm taking that to mean that council is supportive of your recommendation, Janet, and thank you very much for bringing that and for your work on this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now we're back to street construction. 8.6, the Kandy Street construction. Director Dunlop, are you going to talk about this with us?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick overview. As council is aware, the reconstruction of Kandy Street is a part of our capital program for 2021. In particular, it's the 2 blocks between Cornelia Street and Grosvenor Street. The street obviously is in a very distressed condition. Sidewalks are on both sides, also in very poor shape. As part of our reconstructive effort, we've looked at a lot of the design elements to see are there things that we want to change, either to improve the operations of the road or introduce capital efficiencies. These are the things that we do when we look at these projects. Kandy Street is generally a quiet street. It has traffic volumes that are under 100 counts a day. We reached out to all the residents on this street, similar to how we did with Kandy Street on the other side of Cornelia back in 2018. We reached out and had a discussion with the residents and landowners about the sidewalks in particular. Kandy Street does have sidewalks on both sides in these 2 blocks. You'll see a map appended to the council report tonight that gives you some context for the varying levels of service in the neighborhood. So we opened up a discussion with the residents about implementing a change and reducing to a sidewalk on one side. From staff's perspective, that offers lower capital costs, lower winter maintenance costs. We don't have to salt and sand that sidewalk if it's not there. Gives us a little extra green space, which is in keeping with climate change adaptations on our projects. And of course, it also reduces our exposure to liability, whether it's claims resulting from hazards or whatnot. We reached out to 18 properties in total, and of interest is there are 10 properties that would be potentially impacted by changes here. We only received 2 responses regarding the correspondence, and only one of those was actually an objection to the change. We've provided council with a couple of options to consider here for the reconstruction of the street. We are in the late stages of design, but we can adapt those changes before we go out to bids. Option 1, of course, would be maintain status quo with the sidewalk on both sides. Option 2 would see the sidewalk only remain on one side, being the west side. And again, that alignment was chosen to reflect the decisions that were made on the other 2 blocks north of Cornelia. All in all, the capital savings for a decision of this nature is $24,510 on the budget impact of the project this year. And of course, with that perpetual savings and not having to deal with the operating costs of that second sidewalk. So this evening, we're recommending to council that we proceed with the recommendation to adapt the service level to a sidewalk on one side and on the west side in particular. I guess my closing comment I do want to identify to the committee is there was a lot of discussion during the service sustainability reviews for the right-of-way maintenance in terms of what is that level of service that we're after, and it will be certainly an objective of the active transportation plan to get to the root of that answer and hopefully adopt that in a more formal manner. But as it stands, again, we see a very high level of service in these 2 blocks when compared to both current construction and new subdivisions and also the surrounding areas. And that's all for this report.
Thank you. Mayor Panko.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. And the map really says it all right here. When you look at it would be the only blocks in this neighborhood, this area, that would have sidewalks on both sides. We have some streets, like McDonald, Grosvenor, Stephen, who have no sidewalks. We have streets which are busier, like McCann and Rideau and Cornelia with a sidewalk on one side. And I think it's important to be consistent with sort of the path we set forward with the other part of Kandy earlier. So I'm fully supportive of the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I am too. And I want to thank Troy and his people for reaching out to the residents. I remember this on the other part of Kandy, and there was some pushback, but I think with the traffic levels and that sort of thing in the neighborhood itself, it just makes sense. So I support your recommendation.
And thank you. I'm seeing thumbs up around the table. It's one of my favorite parts of Smith Falls, that whole north end. It's got a great feel to it. And I'm sure they'll really appreciate having an improved street. And I too support the one sidewalk. And in one night, we depaved a street and removed a sidewalk. So we're on a roll. Thank you very much. Looks like it's a green light.
Thank you.
And appropriately, we're moving right into the Partners of Climate Protection, talking about depaving. And Mr. Morris is going to talk about milestone number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee may recall back in late 2019, Council decided to join the Partners for Climate Protection program. It's a collaboration between the FCM and another organization that promotes sustainability. And as part of being a member, there are approximately 450 other municipalities across the country that are also members. But the commitment is to follow the 5 steps or 5 milestones that the program outlines. The first milestone is to create a baseline emissions inventory and forecast. So tonight's report is an information report, simply to let you know that we are working on this now. The pandemic sidetracked this one a little bit, but we're on it now. We've done an inventory, and it's important to note we use 2017 as our base year. We had a lot of data, primarily from the Honeywell energy work that was done in 2018, but they used 2017 data, so that seemed like a good baseline year to use. So milestone number 1 is a 2-pronged. The first prong that we've accomplished is the corporate inventory. So that's what we as a corporate entity produce. The second part of that is the community inventory, a little more difficult to calculate, but we have partnered with the County of Lanark. They're doing a lot of work to measure, doing a lot of surveys and other methods of gleaning information to understand what our communities produce. So we're working with them to develop the community data. So the corporate data we've pulled together, and excuse me, it reveals that we in 2017 we produced 1,882 tons of CO2 equivalent. That's the baseline measure that's used. So it's important to know it's not just CO2, it's a whole bunch of greenhouse causing gases that are put into a formula and expressed as a CO2 equivalent. So that's kind of the universal standard of measurement. And so with this information in hand, we can now start overlaying the community profile and then start developing reduction targets. So that's where we're going to come back to you, and what we'll do is we'll do an update. So we have our 2017 baseline, we'll update it. We've done, council have done a lot of things since 2017. Streetlight conversion, implementation of the Honeywell audit. We saved a measurable amount of energy in various facilities. So we've done a lot. We've reduced our fleet. We've not only reduced it, but we've eliminated vehicles and equipment that would tend to produce larger greenhouse gas emissions. So I think we'll be pleasantly surprised when we take stock of where we are today. And then from that, we can start developing targets. And then that will lead us further down the road to achieving, really milestone 3 is the most fundamental one. It's producing a climate action plan. After that, we monitor it and update it as needed. In joining, we did make a commitment to achieve progress in 5 years. So the clock started ticking. We're still in good time. But I offer this tonight just as a starting point for discussion and to let you know that there's more discussion and dialogue coming along in terms of what our targets for reduction will, what you want them to be. So perhaps I'll pause there, Mr. Chair, and answer any questions that might arise.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Alford, why don't you start us off?
Just a note of congratulations or appreciation for this council and our staff to be taking on some of these things in a real meaningful way. I'm very proud of our staff. I'm very proud of this council for some of the decisions they've made and to kick off some things that are super important and, as we've seen, becoming more important almost by the day. So thanks, Malcolm, for this. And I appreciate that municipal council isn't necessarily responsible for everything that goes on in the world, although sometimes it feels like we're being held to that standard. But something like this is quantifiable and meaningful, and it means that we're doing our job to think about and protect the future of this town. So thanks, Malcolm, for that, and thanks to my colleagues as well for seizing the opportunity that was given to us.
Yes, Mayor Panko.
Thanks, Malcolm. Encouraging to get this ball really rolling now, and looking forward to further steps along the way. But one question indicating that electricity is accounting for 45% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And I don't know what the number is in Ontario, but in Canada, over 80% of electricity produced is produced through non-greenhouse gas emitting methods. So I'm wondering if when the report was completed, was accounting for how electricity was being produced, because obviously some methods, in many cases 4 to 5 methods, or 80% of it, is not producing greenhouse gases.
Yeah, through the chair, really good question. I don't know the answer, but I'll find out how the formula is structured. So we know exactly how much energy we've consumed through the bills that we pay. But I'm not sure if it takes into account, I don't think that was an input on our end, whether it was from coal-fired sources or water power or nuclear. But in our case, I think it would be one of those. But good question. We'll seek out the answer.
Great, thank you.
Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, CEO Morris. I think it's really exciting to have this tonight with all the other environmental initiatives that we're getting to. I was wondering, with the waste and water and sewage, does water and sewage just account for all of the energy inputs that go into it, or does it also look at the aerobic, anaerobic digestion and anything that's coming off that? And for waste, that's just waste that's being produced at municipal facilities. It wouldn't count everything we ship off to Cornwall to get stored in landfill.
Yes, through the chair. Good question. So yes, in terms of water and sewage, that's the energy inputs. I'm not sure if there's a calculation for the methane output that we might see from the facility, but again, I'll get an answer to that part of your question. I believe it's largely just energy inputs and the equivalent CO2 emissions from those energy inputs. And the waste, yes, that's waste that we produce internally. So the community portion of the inventory will include the rest of solid waste that we collect throughout the community.
Great, thank you very much.
If I may, I'll jump in. I thank you for this report. The climate crisis is real, and in many ways, COVID has helped it, but it's also taken attention away from it. So it's good to have this back on our agenda. In the Partners for Climate Protection site, when we do this input or this milestone number 1, is there can I go to that website? I should know this. and look to see how we compare to other communities or peer communities our size. So it's good to see these numbers because we can't improve it without measuring it. But how do we compare to our friends in our usual partners, Iron Prior and Gann and Perth and Hawkesbury? And are we able to do that at this stage?
Yeah, great question. So, so our data, once it's uploaded to the site, it'll be present and then comparable. I don't know if they have a tool to do that comparison, but I think it would be important for us to do our own comparison with our similar and comparable municipalities. So good point. And I think once we get the updated inventory, we can do some work to gather perhaps a handful, maybe 5 or 6 communities of similar size and draw that comparison. It's a good point.
Thank you. And I know we're partnering with Lanark County, so that should be relatively straightforward. Mayor Panko, did you want to comment?
Yeah, Mark, we do have a timeline on sort of the path forward when we hope to finish milestone 1 and work our way through the steps, milestone 2, etc.
Yeah, so so we're working closely. The county's developing a steering committee to kind of guide the community collection of data. So we're going to be part of that. So I'm not sure of their time frame. We'll check with Michelle to see. I believe they're looking at a summer target date for that work. So, but that doesn't preclude us from going to the next step of getting our current inventory and then setting targets. So, I mean, clearly we have more control over the corporate emissions than necessarily the community emissions. So that's an area where, you know, policy decisions can affect things more directly. But we want to eventually bring them together, and this will be the content of our own climate action plan. So I would think by the end of summer we'll have a pretty good handle on milestone number 2.
Okay.
And I think, you know, through conversations we can move that forward. Once we get to step 3, we will need to look at bringing in a consulting resource to help us put the plan together. That was identified in my initial report where you decided to join the program. We had identified a budget allocation of $75,000 to do this. We will refine that number and put it in the 2022 budget. But there's a lot of work we can do in-house and in concert with the county. And
yes.
So we have to bring in a consulting resource.
Okay, well, encouraging progress. Thank you.
I'll just wrap up this part of it and say that we are not the first municipality to go down this road, but we're not the last. And it's never a better time than to start this work right now. And I'm glad we are not starting it. I would go so far as to suggest that the town put out a press release with this report and let the public know that we're working on milestone 1 and we have a roadmap to do our part on the climate crisis. And so I'm hoping we can put this good news out there a little bit more than just through our council meeting. But I'll leave that to our communication department to look after. Great.
Okay.
Thank you. We've added to our priority issues item 8.8, the Racism and Discrimination Task Force. And in particular, we want to talk about the membership of that task force. And I think Deputy Clerk Bennett's going to comment on why we're bringing that forward again tonight. Or would you like me to introduce it? I'm quite comfortable.
Sorry.
The good news is we had a really robust response to the membership of our task force on racism and discrimination. We're talking, council met in camera, and we're talked about making an exception to be as inclusive as possible into that, onto that task force. And Deputy Clerk Bennett's going to talk about the process that we have to go through to make that exception.
Good evening, council members. Yes, tonight I'd like to present the applications that were received to council, received from staff, sorry, the applications received. I'd like to present them to council. And if council supportive, you would bring forward a resolution to the next meeting of council to appoint these members to the Racism and Discrimination Task Force. I also, it's kind of twofold. I also need support from a councillor to put their name forward to be part of this committee. The committee is composed of the mayor, a member of council, and then 5 members for resident representatives, 5 members for stakeholder groups, and a staff liaison and the police services member. So I'll read the names that we've received today. We're seeking permission to appoint Jacob Swerbrick, Christine Cutler, Biprajit Senyal, Kaz Bam, Alice Wang Yo, Michelle Bellows, Janelle Lavelle, Gonzalez, Charlene Catchpole, Raven Brittany Lemieux, Jennifer Miller, Manager of Economic Development and Tourism, and Constable Aaron Tompkins to this committee. And again, the second part would be to appoint a member of council. So we are seeking interest in that if council is would like to put their name forward.
So this is the time to put your hand up, dear colleagues. And I know many of you, all of you are on other important committees and work groups and task force. And so Councillor Alford, did you want to make a comment?
As important as this is, and as important as I think this particular one is, given that Beckwith Street Phase 2 and I'm on the DBA, given that we have planning advisory, I'm also working on a food security group. I don't, much as I would like to, I don't think I can have any more time. So I'm hoping that one of our other colleagues will put their hand up and take this on, because it is very important. We thought it was very important a few months ago, and it's just as important, if not more so now. So I'm hoping somebody else will.
If no one's interested, I shouldn't say that. I know you're all interested. If no one has the time, I'm quite delighted to put my name forward and represent, work with the mayor and staff and our colleagues on this important topic. So if that's helpful, I'd be pleased to do that. Okay. So Deputy Clerk Bennett, this will be at our next council meeting about resolution coming forward, and we'll deal with any exceptions we need to at that time.
Yes, part of the resolution will denote an exception to allow non-residents to be formed as part of this committee that's being appointed during this term of council. The terms of reference denotes residents. So just for this group that are being appointed right now, there would be an exception to allow non-residents.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this particular agenda item? Hearing none, I believe that brings us to the end of our meeting, and I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor McGuire, that the committee adjourned its proceedings at 6:46 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting. All in favor? Please stay safe, everyone out there. Thank you.